So good morning, everyone. Welcome to session T119. I'd like to ask you right now to silence any electronic devices and also be sure to evaluate this program with the app or with the yellow papers. So this is our speaker, Patricia, here to talk about the Academic Business Plan, a tool for designing change. Thank you.
Well, thanks, David. I'm very excited to be here today, especially after an 8-hour journey from North Carolina to Philadelphia yesterday. We could have flown to France for the number of hours that we were on the plane. This is presentation T119, the Academic Business Plan, and I am Pat Dieter, the PA Division Chief at Duke University, where we will celebrate next year on October 3rd, the 50th anniversary of PA education. So a little shameless promotion for our celebration. How this presentation began was about a year ago. I was working with our Division of Community Health as part of the Department of Community and Family Medicine at Duke. We are also a division there. And they had been asked by many community hospitals and many academic health centers to consult on population health and community health and how to incorporate it within their offerings. And we started working together on an academic business plan. And at that point, I started to think back of the many times in my career at Duke, which is now 28 years, I had been asked to do academic business plans. I'm not sure at the very beginning that I knew that's exactly what I was doing, but I have come to know them as academic business plans. Is there anyone in here with an MBA? All right, you may have to close your ears for some of this. But academic business plans are certainly very similar to business plans in general with some distinct differences depending on the institution. So in 1990, we began the conversion to the master's degree program at Duke and offered our first master's degrees in 1992. Those of you who were in PA education at the turn of the millennium may remember that Duke had an occupational and environmental medicine certificate program, which was actually very successful. And that was offered to graduates of PA programs around the country. And it ran for about 5 years, and we had a business plan that was associated with that. Over my years at Duke, we have moved 4 times. And I know most programs move their locations. Our last move was a very large one because we had expanded the program and we moved into our own facility. And the logistics of it were quite daunting and the finances of it were quite daunting as well. And as I previously mentioned, this new service that we were providing within multiple divisions in community family medicine of consulting required a business plan. So my apologies to those of you who don't believe academic work is suitable to a business plan. Your dean would beg to differ with you, your president would beg to differ with you, because we all know that viability of our programs matters and customer service matters. And I know we're loath to refer to our students as customers, but they are consumers of our services, as this morning's keynote speaker pointed out very nicely. And of course, to the president and the board of trustees, resources matter. And even though money matters is only in about 20-point type on this PowerPoint, it should be in 100-point type, because we know that money matters and we don't want to spend our resources frivolously and when we want to have good plans in place. Oh, I should have. Nick, you didn't tell me that I didn't have screen view up here. Is that better? Yeah, I am so sorry. Okay, so I thought that was just on my screen, but it was bad for you as well. So what is a business plan? It's a plan for a new venture that states your opportunity clearly, carefully looks at your business, which is in this case is your academic unit, your customers or consumers, your competition threats, and the finances to support the venture. And it really forces you to know where you stand today and to have realistic predictions of what the future holds by developing strategies and alternatives that will increase the success of your plan. So, what a business plan is not. A business plan is not a strategic plan, although the process of strategic planning may very well result in the composition of business plans. It is not a needs assessment. Your business plan certainly incorporates needs assessment. You don't want to develop a product or a service or a course that is not needed. It is not based solely on your knowledge. I have seen some that are. You want to carefully utilize your internal and external resources, human and evidence-based resources, to make sure that what you're planning is realistic. And a business plan is not the result of your delusion or fantasy. Although I do encourage people to dream big, you really need to get down to the nitty-gritty and have numbers and people and plans and physical facilities in your business plan, which most delusions or fantasies do not. What are some of the purposes of academic business plans? I shared with you earlier some of the reasons why I was involved in writing business plans. Certainly with program startups, and many of you in here may be from new programs. I would imagine there was an academic business plan that went into the development of your program. You may have been part of it. You may not have been part of it. If that is the case, I hope you have at least seen it, because it contains all of the really important information about how this is going to work. Maybe you're adding on to your program. Maybe your program is 24 months. You've decided to extend it, and you need a plan for that. Or maybe your program is offering the option to earn an additional degree. And how that will fit in with your curriculum and how it will impact your core product or service is very important. I mentioned our Occupational Environmental Medicine Certificate program. It could be programs right now are thinking of developing a certificate in emerging infectious diseases. That is something we're all concerned about these days, and it seems to be new knowledge that we don't have, and perhaps there would be a group of people, PAs or other folks who would be interested in a certificate program that you might offer. New course or courses. The academic business plan is perfectly suited to the development of a new course or courses, especially because it gets down to the level of operation and finance. And there's a presentation, I believe this morning, about what do things cost. And those of us in administration know that everything has a cost, a financial cost, an opportunity cost, a political cost. Program expansion. We went from 45 students a year to 90 over an 8-year period of time. And there was extensive planning that went into that. Maybe you're starting a practice, and this is a somewhat different concept than the other opportunities, but maybe you're starting a faculty practice or an interprofessional clinic, as we are at Duke. A very clear business plan needs to go with that prior to the beginning of that. So I thought I would bring you up to date on some of the lexicon in academic business planning. And when I searched, what I found was that PA leaders and PA faculty use the common terms all the time. So what I found instead that I thought I would share with you for a moment of levity was from a Forbes website. And this is from their list of 45 most annoying, pretentious, and useless business phrases. So we don't want to make use of these phrases. Make hay, I think we've all heard this. It's an idiom from a 16th century British philosopher, make hay while the sun shines. Certainly you want to plan a new venture or program when the opportunities are right and when the stars are in alignment. And that's the ideal, but often we're not able to. But apparently make hay is rather hackneyed and old. Bleeding edge, we talk about cutting edge program. This is going to be so good. We're using all the latest technology. It's going to be so good, it's going to be the bleeding edge. So apparently that one has come through the lexicon. Creative destruction, this was a new phrase for me, and it's when ventures fail, it's time for a new generation of capitalists to generate fortunes. So it made me feel kind of old, and the next generation may do this better than we do. And we all know that's the case anyway. But this is applied to the Federal Reserve, that a lot of people think the Federal Reserve just needs to be creatively destroyed. Mind sharing with the customer. Anybody know which company is well known for this? Apple. Yes, we were there 2 years ago in Seattle. We're in Philadelphia. I can speak freely here, but apparently, their marketers. I don't want to say they have a cult-like attitude toward consumers, but they are known to develop their marketing so that the consumer feels as if they are of one mind with Apple. So moving the needle, that's the term venture capitalists use. If you're developing a new program or a new service or product, and the person who invests the money doesn't see that there will be a seismic reaction to it, moving the needle, then it may not be so good a thing to develop. And finally, my personal favorite, it's a little naughty. Open the kimono. This is where you share information, maybe with your competitors, and reveal some information. So I thought these were kind of funny. And if you go to the list of Forbes 45, you'll find more that will amuse you. The components of an academic business plan include these. The executive summary I liken to the HPI on a complete history. This is summarization of all the really important parts of what you're going to do. And you know how we tell students that when people are reading their complete history, sometimes they can only read the HPI, so you better get all the good stuff in there and the stuff that people really need to know. So the executive summary goes first, it does not go last, and it's similar to the HPI. Your company overview, your academic unit overview, we're going to talk some about internal and external benefits, the business environment, a description of your proposed service or product, your strategic moves, financial management, action plan, and appendices. The executive summary should be very succinct. If you're going to write well on any part of your academic business plan, make sure that your executive summary is very pithy and to the point. Because the higher up it goes in your academic chain, the less time people have to read. You want to make sure the goals of your project are in there. What are the conditions in the market right now that make this a good time to do what you're doing? What's your competition out there, and be realistic. What kind of funding is required? Is this budget neutral? Is this going to cost money? And where is the money going to come from? Are you going to lose money on this, but it's still a good plan? And how are you going to cover that? And finally, your exit strategy. Whenever you propose something, you need to propose how you're going to get out of it as well. Yes?
For an exit strategy in academic business plan, what is your exit plan?
Well, let me give you an example. When I was working with our Division of Community Health and they're developing and consulting and evaluation services, their exit plan is, it can be something as simple as we're not going to do it anymore, depending on the customers, on the customer base. So that happened to be a budget neutral proposal, but so it can depend. It can be, if you are proposing something rather large, like a PA program, then your regional accreditor will tell you what your exit plan needs to be composed of. So what's your unit's mission when you're overviewing your academic unit or your business? And how does the proposal fit within your mission? This is called context analysis. So if your unit's mission, if you're a PA program in a mountain state and your mission specifically says that you are training PAs to work within a 50-mile radius of your PA program, then having a new project that would train cardiothoracic surgery PAs who would work 150 miles from your base program seems out of sync with your mission. I'm not saying it's not, that there can't be reasons maybe why that wouldn't be done, but on the face of it, that would not be contextually consistent with the mission of your program. Let's say instead that you wanted to develop a certificate program on emerging infectious diseases, and your unit has done this before, has started up certificate programs before, has an event planner on staff, has a microbiologist on staff, has two PAs who have worked in infectious diseases, then your unit might be pretty suited to that proposal. And you might be well qualified to provide that service. So we're looking at what resources you already have to make it a good fit while you're minimizing your costs. What is the environment in which your unit competes internally and externally? And all of us know that we compete internally, particularly if we're at a large academic health center. We know that we're competing for rotations with other learners, with residents, with medical students, with nurse practitioner students. So what's the overall environment in which your unit competes? So competition is not a bad word. It's just saying, who do you work with and who might take resources that you might need and actually be justified in taking those resources. Externally, is there someone down the road who's already offering a certificate program in emerging infectious diseases? Is there someone who's more qualified to do it than you? What's your marketplace, and who are your customers or consumers, and what consumers are you targeting with this new plan? And what are the threats to your current service? I think all of us in here who have been program directors have had to say to someone higher than us at some point in time, the main business here is educating PA students. How many people have had to say that? Oh, come on. Only one? You've thought it. I know you have thought it in your minds. When you're asked to take something on or do something additionally, you want to say, our main business here is educating PA students. So you do have to look at what are the threats to your current service. If you would start doing something additionally, how would that impact what your main service is, and what would be the barriers or threats in developing the new service or product? And I think that'll become clear in a minute. it's nice to think about the benefits. There are many benefits to developing a new project, a new plan. How will it benefit you internally? I know for us, in developing certificate programs, it has brought us into different academic and operations units at Duke that we maybe previously had just a tangential relationship with. And we now are good buddies with those units, and we know who the people are there, and we know who to call on. And it helps you with your flexibility. And you know, when we admit PA students, how many of you say to yourself in committee, will this PA be flexible? Will they be able to adapt to a changing environment? So it does help us to maintain our flexibility in planning and delivery, to meet new and emerging priorities. And we're also providing an opportunity for enhancement of professional skills to our internal constituents or consumers, if we're developing a new course in our program, or to an external constituent, an opportunity to bring more people into the fold. When we had the Occupational Environmental Medicine Certificate Program at Duke, I can't remember the exact number of people that went through that, but it was probably close to 200. And many of them were not Duke graduates. And it was so wonderful to have them enrich our curriculum by their varied experiences. And I'm not saying we stole them from their other schools, but we were able to bring them a bit into our educational process. The description of the proposed service or product. Well, obviously you need to be able to describe exactly what it is that you're going to do. And you need to describe things like, will this be virtual or on the ground? And if it's on the ground, you have the physical facilities to do it. Chris and his co-presenter's presentation about finding adequate physical space is a huge thing for us as well in interprofessional education. So our new, it's now 4 or 5 years old, course on interprofessional prevention, one of the biggest problems we had was finding the physical facilities to accommodate the group. Are you going to need additional person power, and what will that look like? What's the timing? Is this synchronous, asynchronous? What are your technology resources? I find these are often underestimated in budgets. We had an episode last week, and I see our associate director is here, where our admissions staff had arranged to do some additional manipulation of our computer, our software that processes applications, and she and I just looked at each other and said, do they know that costs money? You know, it's not all free. It's an external consultant for us in that case. So people often underestimate the need for technology resources, and they neglect to put them in budgets. Well, how are you going to market this? And finally, how are you going to operate it? Marketing strategies often respond to market changes. They are very important. When we had our OEM certificate program, it was initially offered for PAs, but then the PAs returned to their practices or their corporations, and their physicians or their NP colleagues said, is that program open to NPs and MDs? And we said, well, yeah, sure. So the market changed. We didn't realize that there were NPs and physicians that would be interested in that, and there were. If you have, if whatever you're developing requires a financial contract, anything where it talks about the services that will be conducted, the payment for the services and so forth, please talk to your legal department very early. We have found that that can be one of the things that slows the development of a service down, especially when you're working with external people. because lawyers like to look at things over and over and over again and change the language. So especially if you're at an academic health center that also has a law school associated with that university, somehow that seems to increase the amount of time it takes to produce a contract. We all know that our syllabi and our course descriptions are de facto educational contracts with students. They are very important to develop and develop them well. In our strategy, we're also talking grittier detail about the product, and this may be, or how the service will be conducted. So this is where timelines and specific operational detail comes in. So it's getting more detailed. You want to be a little clairvoyant and see where the product or service will be within 3 years. And I chose that as an arbitrary time. Your dean or whomever you report to may ask that it be for a different period, maybe 3 years and 5 years. And finally, what happens if the product or service fails? And this was your question about, exit strategies. It's hard to think about, but when you are enlisting resources, you're developing contracts, you need to be thinking also about what happens if we're unable to continue this particular project. Financial management, I'm married to an accountant, so I have to talk about this. So it's interesting, your unit's current financial status, I have seen in my time as a consultant and in visiting other programs for other reasons, that it is often very difficult for a program director to specifically say, bottom line, where their program stands financially. I appreciate that some of you may be in that position. Your dean may hold things very closely. It may be on an as-needed basis. But before you begin your planning, you need to have a careful idea of what your unit's financial status is, and as you develop your thinking of how this will impact your unit. So do the resources for the service exist? And those resources may be central. They may be a grant from within your institution, a startup grant. They may be an external HRSA grant. Will new faculty or staff be needed? Well, if all of our faculty and staff are generally working to the full extent of their assigned duties. So you have to figure out, if you're doing something new, exactly who is going to do it and how. At Duke, if we develop a new faculty position, it has to be submitted through workforce planning over a year in advance. And I would imagine a lot of your institutions have the same sort of procedures prior to your budget period. So there are very careful levels of scrutiny that those proposals undergo, and there has to be excellent justification for them. What's the cost of expanding or contracting the service? So you may be proposing project A, but then there may be A+5 or A-5. It costs money to expand. Are we hearing music?
No.
You're not hearing? Well, money is music, I guess. I don't know. So it does cost money to expand your services. A lot of people think that your income or your revenue from a service will expand in direct proportion to the number of positions in your program that's expanded, or whatever it is. Not the case at all. It does cost money. There may be a net benefit, but a cost of expanding is there. Same with contraction of services. You may need a line item budget of the startup costs and the source of the funding. This depends on the tone within your institution and how much detail they want. You want to consider intangible costs such as lost opportunities and political liabilities. Lost opportunities could be, you know, if you're a microbiologist and you're an infectious diseases person or developing this new certificate program on emerging infectious diseases, they may be less available to help with curricular innovation that may deal with their areas. So that's a lost opportunity. Political liabilities, let's say you're dean. You have this great proposal, you go to the dean, you present it, and the dean goes, okay, doesn't seem really excited about it. But you're convinced that you can do this. And the dean says, okay, if you're convinced, you go ahead. And hopefully you have a dean that is willing to let you make mistakes, because that's an important part of your advancement as a professional. But let's say this is a colossal flop. You may have a political liability on your hands. And finally, the net financial impact. And this is what a lot of people refer to. Well, is this even? Does it make money? Does it lose money? It's okay to have a project that loses money if it has other purposes. So your action plan, how are you going to proceed? What steps will you take? Who is involved in the planning and execution of this project? Do you have to put new policies and procedures into place? Of course you do, all the time, with something like this. New skills that will be required to make the plan work. When we developed our occupational medicine certificate program years ago, and I was asked to be the director of that, I said, oh, great, wonderful. And I did have experience working in occupational medicine. We had a division of occupational medicine in our department with internationally renowned faculty, but I still needed intensive training in occupational medicine curriculum, and I had to go get it, and that costs money. And you also need to describe how you're going to generate buy-in for success. You know, if you develop a program that nobody knows about even within your institution, and I found this sometimes occurs within our program, that we're making changes and we'll be at a faculty meeting and someone will say, when did that happen? So come on, this happens at your programs too. You need to work on sharing the word about this so that you get good buy-in. We also, of course, have to evaluate our success. And how do you know if it's successful? If you have high interest or enrollment or purchase, through a process of quality improvement. You'll know what you need to change. You may want to have some focus groups. You certainly want your consumers to evaluate it in the same way that you have your typical entry-level student evaluate. What has worked and what hasn't, and what has changed in the marketplace. You know, our theoretical emerging infectious diseases certificate program, if Ebola is suddenly contained, that might not be needed in the emerging infectious diseases program that you're about to offer, but enterovirus N68 may need to be. Probably needs to be more now than Ebola. Okay, so appendices. You know, I think we view appendices as, well, that's what we put whatever we can't fit into the actual proposal. But these can be very enriching to your plan. If you need to hire people or you're moving people into positions, you need to have clear descriptions of their positions. If you're developing a course, you want to draft course syllabus. If you need to develop contracts, a draft contract with the appropriate wording. A more detailed budget may be required, and also a more detailed timeline for implementation. We always need to talk about pitfalls. One of the biggest pitfalls about academic business plans is there was no planning in the first place, and we've all seen examples of that, you know, where we say after we've been somewhere, ooh, the planning for that. They were not organized, the boom. That was not good. So and I've seen many examples of this, or something that we're working with several groups at Duke right now, where I know they are not approaching this from a business plan point of view, and it has greatly delayed the implementation of this project. Ignoring mission and values. If you ignore your core mission and values, you do it at your own peril, because you're probably not going to be very good at what you do. So you need to recognize your strengths and build on your strengths when you decide on a new offering. Avoiding reasonable risk is a pitfall. Everything has risks. And calculating reasonable risk, I'm sure there's a formula out there. I don't know it, but I think we all know when we're going out on a limb or not. And that's the role of deans, to pull people in from off the limbs. But a little bit of reasonable risk is okay, and it's probably a good thing, because it means you're being adventurous and cutting edge, not bleeding edge. And finally, letting one person dominate a plan. Having one person develop the academic business plan and be responsible for the implementation of a new project is probably not a good idea for a number of reasons. One, the person may be hit by the proverbial bus, and where does the project go? Is there someone else who is equally as informed about the project and can carry on? Second, we've all seen this where someone will say, that's so-and-so's pet project. Don't touch that, don't suggest it, that's so-and-so's pet project. And, really from a consumer point of view, that is not a good idea, because then feedback and innovation does not occur. These are my references. You'll notice the bottom one is Business Plans for Dummies. It's actually very good, and I highly recommend it. And my husband purchased it for me. Yes. But it was very helpful. He was being serious. He was being absolutely serious. And some of those books are very good if you haven't referred to them. So I think this is a good time now for discussion and questions. Yes.
Is there a resource or some site online for faculty that need to do a business plan, whether it's adding on to their building, or even just a simple return on investment per student back to the university, that will tell you some numbers, some estimates of cost?
I think people don't often enough use their internal resources for developing those sorts of things. I think you would find that someone centrally would be able to assist you with that in your financial office, because they do those sorts of calculations all the time. And I think sometimes we can be a little afraid to approach them because we're afraid we're going to open our kimono accidentally and reveal too much information to them. But they can be very good at assisting. There's nothing like a tutor right there with you. And it also then is done in the way your university wants it to be presented. Someone over here had a question.
Yeah,
Yes, sir.
General question. My biggest problem with my institution in the UK is they claim they're risk-taking and entrepreneur and all that stuff, but it's bullshit. They don't like, and what they don't recognise is that not taking a risk is even more risky.
Yes.
Have you got any thoughts about how you can kind of manipulate, persuade, etc., the powers that be that actually it's a good thing to do something that isn't a slam dunk, dead easy, anyone can do it project, because you need to be doing something that is risk-taking, but
Right.
and accept the fact that sometimes it won't work.
Right. the same husband, the only husband that provided me with that book, also worked in England for quite a while. He loves British humor. Perhaps humor would work, but you know, it's I totally appreciate that there's a fear of the unknown and a fear of striking out, and I think it comes from people maybe not having enough exposure to projects that were highly successful that went outside of the usual scope. So I would recommend more exposure for them. There's also the expression, and well, I won't use the expression because it might be a little bit offensive to some of our older people, but as people leave the institution and people come up, there tends to be more innovation. So us old people can get stuck in our ways at times. Other questions? All right, well, this was really just a 20,000-foot view on the academic business plan. There is no one recognized format. The literature on this is very, very thin. I had a lot of difficulty identifying academic publication of academic business plan thought. It was more in association with specific projects that had been developed, like development of a residency or development of a particular service within a teaching hospital. You know, I think we need not to be afraid of business planning. I think it is very, very helpful. It answers a lot of questions as you're developing your project and as you're executing it and as you're evaluating it. And it gives you something to go back to refer to when you say, what is it we were trying to do in the first place and how can we change it? So I'm happy to take any questions at the podium, and I thank you for your attention.